Thank you all for lifting your voices together. The last song, Forever, we've been working on for the last few weeks, and the whole purpose of that was so we can sing it next week at Easter. Next week is the time when we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, when we look to the empty tomb, and such a powerful meaning that has. But for the rest of us, we're going to be in Mark chapter 15 this morning. What a weird morning. Can we just acknowledge that? It's kind of weird. I'm going to move this real quick as well. I want to be even closer to this front row here. Yeah, I don't know what was going on and what all that stuff was happening. Me and Mike were talking before the service how everything was just hard this morning. Everything. It felt like there was some sort of jam in the cogs. But you know what? We're going to look past that. We're going to dive into the Word. I don't know. I do know that there's someone out there that doesn't like what we do. And doesn't like that. Someone named the devil who doesn't like that the church goes to the Bible and looks to Jesus. And I do know, and I can't explain all of it, but I do know that there's someone out there that doesn't like that. And it would make sense to throw a little extra effort our way, as today we're going to look at the single most important scene in all of Christian history. And I would argue all of history. We're looking at the single most important picture that's ever been painted for us, found at the crucifixion. And we're going to look at Mark chapter 15, which is where we find only one of the crucifixion accounts. There's the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels is what they're called. They're called synoptic, seeing together, because they're different perspectives of the same stories for the most part. And we're going to start with Mark chapter 15. We're gonna be painting a picture this morning. Actually, I'm going to back up because I just really don't like being that close to you guys after all. Mark chapter 15, we're going to paint a picture this morning of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ dying on the cross. What's the purpose of a picture? Answer me this. Why do you keep pictures? What's the purpose of them? Somebody just kind of blurted out.
Memories.
Memories, yeah. Awesome. I love it when they go right where I'm going, the first answers, then I don't have to worry about shaking my head and nodding. Oh yeah, that's a great answer. So yeah, memories, that's awesome. This is exactly why we have pictures. This is exactly why we take time each year to look at the cross and we look at the empty tomb. It's something that causes us to remember, because something about memories affect us right now. And there's something about going back and recalling something that actually fuels us forward towards something. And so this morning, we're going to draw a picture, we're going to take a picture, we're going to put ourselves in the picture, and we're going to remember the most important scene ever painted for us if you're a Christian this morning. And what I want to zoom in and look at this scene is the different characters, the different people that are there. And we're going to pan across this frame, and we're going to see who is there and why they're there. Have you ever thought about that? Who are the people standing around Jesus as he's dying? Who are the different groups of people, and why are they there? So this is where we're going to be headed this morning. We're going to look at who's all there, who's at the cross, who's watching the blood trickle down from his body and pool up, who's there watching the flies sticking to his body and swarming around these three dead, dying corpses, because they didn't just replace those crosses, the vertical beams, every time. They left them there. They normally just brought the horizontal part that they tacked their hands into along, not even fresh, but newer, and tacked those to the cross. So this is a bloody, this is a gross scene. So we're going to see who's there. Because you've got to be moved powerfully by something to put yourself in that situation. All right, so if you do have your Bibles, go to Mark chapter 15. And we are going to read the crucifixion account. And we are going to march our way through and look at the characters that are there. We're going to march our way through and look at the faces, the groups of people that are there, and hopefully give some explanation. This is one of the richest stories there is, not just on a spiritual level. We're going to talk about politically, we're going to talk even about medically, what happens to the very bones and body of Jesus, and we're going to be talking about different richness, different depths of the story. It's a beautiful sacrificial story that should move us to action. All right, so If you're in Mark chapter 15, I'm going to pick it up in verse 21, and we're going to read the crucifixion and the death of Jesus Christ. And this makes complete sense because Easter is when we find that Jesus is not dead anymore. Easter is when we find that the tomb is empty. It's gone. The stone has been rolled away. He is alive. He is alive. So here we go. Before that happens, though, there was a death. Jesus is crucified and Jesus dies. Verse 21. I'm going to march through this and just kind of pause when we see a new face show up. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. All right, so we're going to read this asking the question, who's all there? And after we read through it and we see the different faces, then we're going to talk about what actually happened. And we're going to hopefully add some girth, add some depth to this story, and then we're going to see the significance, the absolute wonderful significance of the cross of Jesus. Verse 21 says this, "And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross," to carry the cross of Jesus is what that's saying. "And they brought him to the place called Golgotha," which means place of a skull. All right, so immediately we see, in the first two verses of this passage, we see two faces show up. One is this guy named Simon, and then we also see this pronoun of they. So who's they? Because we're jumping into the middle of this moving picture, and it says, "And they compelled this guy named Simon." So what's the deal with Simon? Simon is this guy from North Africa. Simon is, it tells us here, he's the father of Rufus, he's the father of Alexander. We know from Romans chapter 16 that Paul is writing, he says, to salute Rufus. So essentially tell Rufus and his mom hello is what Paul says in Romans chapter 16. If that's the same Rufus here, then his dad would be Simon, and he most likely came to know Jesus. It might not have been because he carried his cross, but because his children were followers of Jesus. And so we see this Simon of Cyrene. The people of North Africa were also often dark-skinned. So he very well could have been a black man, which just adds to the beauty of the cross. And it adds to the richness and depth of the cross, because there are no boundaries. And when you come to the foot of the cross, you abandon the race from which you were, and there is a new raceless race of Christians. So this is a beautiful picture, and it's probably the reason that that the soldiers that we're about to talk about, chose Simon. Because his skin tone was obvious that he wasn't from around there. And that they couldn't have a Jew carry the cross of Jesus Christ, because that would be awful. His own, his own friends or whatever, forcing them, this would be terrible. We couldn't have a Gentile carrying the cross of Jesus either. So they see this guy who wasn't from around there, and they say, "Hey, you, grab this cross and help this man." That's Simon. Probably later came to know Jesus. But it says they. Do you guys see that? If you have your bones or your Bibles, if you have your phones or your Bibles, go to Mark 15 and follow along. Verse 21, it says, "And they compelled Simon." Who's the they then? This is the soldiers that were there at the time of Jesus. This is the soldiers that were facilitating the death and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. This is the Roman soldiers. These guys were paid to be there. They are paid to transfer troops, to take prisoners and to move them from one place to the other. This is part of their job. And they're the they in this passage. They led him to be crucified. They compelled Simon to carry his cross. They brought him to a place called Golgotha. They cast lots for his clothes. Whenever it says they, it's talking about the soldiers. And we can so easily just glimpse over the soldiers, these people that are there. But these are powerful people. If you've studied anything about the Roman army, about Roman soldiers, this is the most elite. These are the most organized soldiers. This is the most well-trained, the most robust group of fighting men. It's actually incredibly interesting if you zoom in on their history and the way that the Roman soldiers were organized. Roman soldiers, the largest group, you guys might know this, was called a legion. All right, a legion was the largest group, and depending on that point in time in history, that number of men varied. At this time, it was probably 6,000 men, and if they structured their men in their checkerboard systems that they did, it would stretch 1.5 miles, 6,000 men. That's a legion. And within a legion, that big group, they had something known as a cohort. A battalion is what we call them, a cohort. And that was roughly like 400 to 600 men in a group, a cohort. We actually know from a few verses earlier, in verse 16 of Mark chapter 15 here, it says, they called together the whole battalion. They called together the whole cohort. All right, so we don't know exactly how many men were on duty at the time of Jesus walking through the city, but they called together the whole cohort. So up to 600 men were potentially at that scene where they're watching Jesus bleed and die. And they're standing behind him mocking, as verse 16 and 17 tells us. They clothed him in a purple cloak, and they twisted together a crown of thorns. They put that on him, and they began to salute him sarcastically, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck his head with a reed, and they spit on him, and they kneeled down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of his purple cloak and put his own clothes on, and they led him out to crucify him. So we have hundreds of soldiers, the elite of the elite, are beating up Jesus, are making fun of Jesus, are mocking the man whom we love, the man who, the reason we're here. There's hundreds of them. But within that legion, there's a cohort, and within the cohort, there's something called the century. And that century was just actually something made up of 100 men. So they had 4 to 6 groups of 600 men, and then they had 4 to 6 groups of 100 men called a century. And that's the word from which we get the centurion. And if you guys, as we read along, we're going to run into the centurion again in this story. So hold on to that idea of the centurion. The centurion was the one in charge of that 100 men group. All right? And the centurions, they didn't just, this wasn't just a tenured thing. This wasn't they just finally worked their way up. This was the manliest of the manliest that had history in battle, that had battle scars, that worked, that fought their way to lead this group of 100 men. The centurion. So this is like your gladiator kind of guy. This is the toughest of the tough, who's a centurion. And that's going to play into this later as well as we look at it, because in verse 39 it says the centurion who's watching Jesus die, verse 39 he says, he saw that Jesus had breathed his last. He said, truly, this man was the Son of God. That man's man, the toughest of the tough, the roughest and toughest, man's man acknowledged that Jesus was God. And that is awesome. All right, so there we have a centurion, and then everyone else under the centurions were just infantrymen. This is just your normal enlisted guy, pretty much, who would join the forces and was assigned to a battalion, a cohort, a group, and they had specific assignments based on where they were. But these are the guys that are being paid to be there. They're paid to be at the cross. The centurion, actually, the leader of that 100, was paid 15 times more than the infantryman. So it does him no harm to stand there and watch someone die. It does him no harm to grab his spear that he's been well-versed in that sword, and inflict pain on somebody. That is no harm. I'm getting paid 15 times more than my infantryman. And this is one of the motives that we find around the cross. And unfortunately, this is a terrible situation that when Jesus is dying, the very eyes that are watching him do this are there because of money. It is a very sad situation of the church this day. Is in some people's eyes and perspective, has become a way to funnel money, to take funds and direct them into their own account. And Jesus had something to say about that. He walks into the temple, and when people are doing that, he flips the table. It's almost the maddest we've ever seen Jesus. It's like, what are you doing? You're taking the temple, with a similar concept, the church, and you're taking people's money, and you're personally profiting from this place that's supposed to be a spiritual gathering to strengthen people and to edify and equip people to live for God. This is a terrible motive. It's a terrible motive to be in church work. It's a terrible motive to be here this morning. There's no money in what you're doing, guys. But I can guarantee you that you will see Jesus this morning. But we see one of the motives here by the soldiers, by the centurion. They're motivated by duty. They're motivated by money. Maybe they have some kind of allegiance just as a good soldier, but they're there. And I would call that group the required group. All right, so when we come to the first group of people that we see around the cross, it's the required. It's the ones that have to be there. All right, the centurions and the soldiers, they're being paid to be there. And then as we keep reading, we see here that in verse 27, with Jesus, they crucified 2 robbers. So this is also part of the required. The robbers, the thieves, had to be there. They had to be there by the law required them to do so. So here they are. They've done something wrong. They got caught. They've been convicted. They are they're required by the law to be there. So this is a couple more faces that we can add to the group of people at the scene. Mark 15:20, we see the soldiers leading Jesus and the robbers to crucify him. So not only are there soldiers, and Simon probably stuck around after he helped carry Jesus' cross, we see these robbers. And then we see Jesus himself. Jesus himself is obviously at the scene. This scene, its climax is going to be in Jesus and his death. And we're going to zoom in on this in a second. But here, he's also part of the group that's required to be there. The soldiers are paid to be there. The robbers are required to be there. And Jesus is forced illegally to be there. We're going to talk about that in a second. Why is this illegal that Jesus is there? But here we find Jesus. He is the cursed one. Galatians 3:13 says, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree. Jesus shouldn't have been there. He wasn't required to be there by law. He was innocent. He should have been able to walk scot-free. He was forced illegally to be there. All right, so that's the group of the required. They had to be there. There's a second group as we continue to look through this passage. Let's pick it up in verse 23, though. It says, after they brought Jesus to Golgotha, the place of the skull, and actually on Golgotha, there's 2 main perspectives of where people actually think that is. One is the place of the skull. Does that actually mean a formation in the rock that looked like a skull? And there was a place just outside of Jerusalem's city walls where there was a place just like that, and it did make perfect sense for 3 crosses to be able to be placed up there. And so maybe that's why it's the place of the skull, because the geography says there's a skull. This looks like a skull. But some people say it actually might be called the place of the skull because it's a place of execution where bodies are often left to rot, and it's literally a place of skulls. And so we don't know exactly, but if you went to Jerusalem, you would go to either a place called Gordon's Crossing or some name like that, and then you go to this hill of the skull, and that's where Jesus most likely was crucified. So moving on, it says, and they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he didn't take it. And they crucified him, and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. This is crazy. This is crazy. You see these soldiers, you see these guys that were recruited into the Roman army about 18 to 20 years old. I think most women say men don't mature until they're 25. Wives, do you agree? Girlfriends, do you agree? Yeah, probably. So they're these immature guys who are just getting paid to be there, that are mocking Jesus and trying to have some fun with his garments. They crucify him. They're not even watching this scene. They're not even observing what's happening. They're taking his clothes and they're trying to get money from it, casting lots for them. They're gambling on Jesus' clothes. Verse 25 says, and it was the 3rd hour when they crucified him, the 3rd hour of the day, based on their calendar, not ours, so it wouldn't be 3. Verse 26 says, and the inscription of the charge against him read, the King of the Jews. Above the head of Jesus Christ and whoever it was, the robber, the murderer, the insurrectionist, whoever was guilty and worthy of this punishment, they placed a plaque above their heads where it stated their crime. And we see here that this isn't a crime, this is a statement. The King of the Jews. It doesn't say that he broke any laws. It's sarcastically saying this man claimed to be King of the Jews. This guy is a joke. This guy is worthy of mockery. Verse 27, and with him they crucified 2 robbers, one on his right and one on his left. That's the first group of people that are required to be there. We come to a second group of people in verse 29. And this one kind of shocks me, and this is actually what led me to this passage, because this passage brings out this in a unique way. Verse 29 says, and those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself, come down from the cross. It says they railed on him. They spoke reproachfully. They reviled him. They blasphemed him. Essentially, these people they're not even stopping to gaze on what's going on. They're walking by this scene of execution, and they're stopping only long enough to make fun of Jesus. This blows my mind. They passed by. Jesus, the man who claimed to be God, the man who we've come to know and believe that he is God, who had so objectively and conclusively healed people, the man who had fed thousands of people, made miracle after miracle after miracle, the one who had single-handedly roused the whole religious structure of the day. This man who claims to be the Messiah is being hung on a cross, and these people casually strolled by, just stopping long enough to mock him. This should blow our minds. Jesus, the single most important point in history, people are passing by. They're walking right by like nothing's ever happening. What's that stupid movie with the little penguins? They'd always say, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Madagascar. I knew you would know. Paul's 5 kids. He is all about that. Nothing. This is not like that. This is someone who is so hardened, who is so self-interested, someone so consumed with what their schedule has to offer and what they need to be doing. They pass by people dying. I mean, like, forget Good Samaritan stuff. This isn't even close to that. It's walking on by. And I don't know where you guys are at this morning, but I do know there is a wealth of knowledge. There is a wealth of spiritual learning, a lifetime of Jesus to be learned in this book. And are you walking by? No, we weren't at that scene. No, we weren't right next to the cross watching this happen. We've got it all right here, and we have the door to knowing God. Are you stopping? Are you looking to Jesus? Or are you walking on by? Are you walking on by? I beg you, Christian, don't walk by the scene of Jesus on the cross. This is what fuels the Christian life, the epicenter of the gospel. Jesus Christ dying for you. This shouldn't be much new information, because this is a memory. This is a picture that if you're a Christian, you've already taken. All right, you've already been there. You've seen this initially. We're looking back. All right, so this is just to help us, to cause us all to remember the cross, to look back. And I hope that this scene is very familiar to you. I hope that the picture of Jesus Christ on the cross is something that you have contemplated time and time again, and it has fueled you to forgive. It has fueled you. It has given you spiritual life to move on. But this is the second group of people here. I don't even know what to call these people. Like the shock and awe givers, the scoffers, the scorners. This is the second group of people that just walked by. They're proudly motivated by self-interest. And part of you wants to slap these people. Part of you wants to reach out and say, do you know what you're doing? Do you know what's happening? Do you know that this is our Messiah? This is the long-awaited King, and he's being murdered illegally? And so part of you know, hindsight's 20/20. We have the whole picture. Part of you wants to just reach out and backhand him. What's the deal? Why are you walking on by? And I think the other part of you wants to cry, because you see yourself in that. You see yourself, and you see at times the disinterest that you have with the things of Jesus. I think that there are times in your life when you see that you are so self-interested, so self-consumed. You may have walked by and didn't even know it. Don't walk by this scene, Christian, please. This is at the core, the heart of the gospel. Let's pick up. Verse 29, they passed by him, they derided him, they wagged their heads. They said, you who destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself, come down from the cross. They're making fun of him because earlier, Jesus had made claims to his disciples that he would tear down the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. And he obviously wasn't meaning about the actual temple that Herod was building at the time of Jesus' death. He wasn't talking about the physical construct of the temple. And that would make them very mad because they've been building this thing for years. And then Jesus walks up and arrogantly says, you can rebuild it in 3 days. Who are you? You must have some sort of like special construction management skills that we don't have. You're an idiot. This is what they're saying. Come down and save yourself. You who think you can tear down this temple that's taken decades to build it and rebuild it in 3 days, you're an idiot. These are the passerbys just stopping long enough to look and call Jesus an idiot and move on. Jesus wasn't saying that. He was saying, guys, I'm going to be destroyed. I'm going to die, but I'm coming back in 3 days and I'm going to be rebuilt. I'm coming back to life. That's the second group of people that we see here at the foot of the cross, the surrounding area. The third group of people is what I would call the entertained, or the pleased, or the appeased maybe. And this is where we see them. As the people are passing by mocking Jesus, verse 31 says, so also, all right, so the people that he's about to mention are also making fun of Jesus and calling him an idiot. So verse 31, so also the chief priests with the scribes mocked him to one another. The chief priests and the scribes. All right, so this is the next group of the entertained, the pleased. Or we could say this, the religious type. The chief priests had some of the highest political influence and power. These are some of the most renowned figures in the time of Jesus alive. The chief priests, the high priests in the Jewish system, they're the high priests. They are way up there as far as it goes in the power scheme of things. And here we see that the most religious type played one of the largest roles in this crucifixion. According to some of the other accounts of the crucifixion, the high priests are actually the ones that accused Jesus to begin with. They're the ones that actually persuaded the crowds against Jesus. They're the ones that actually mocked Jesus. They're the ones that handed Jesus over to Pilate and said, will you please kill this man? They're the ones that they bribed the soldiers, Matthew 28 tells us. They're the ones who rejected Jesus as king. So we see that the most religious people of the day were the most out of touch with Jesus. I hope that's not us, guys. I hope that's not us. And I hope that we don't just get caught up in this religious system and kind of observe to begin with and then see where you fit in and how to work the system. I hope that's not what happens. I hope that we are not guilty of being the religious elite. Guys, this is what's happening. I'll talk about this more, but the high priests and the scribes are professionals when it came to Jewish law. Jesus, being a Jew, shows up on the scene and says, hey, you remember how being a Jew, on the 8th day you have to be circumcised, remember that? Well, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't remember when Jesus shows up on the scene and he doesn't totally kill the Old Testament, but he says, hey guys, this is fulfilled in me. All right, there's a new way of living. It's the grace-filled life. And so the chief priests, the high priests, and the scribes, they look at Jesus as a threat. He is threatening them because they view themselves as protectors of Judaism, protectors of being a Jew. And Jesus shows up on the scene and he's threatening that. And they love the religious system. They love what this fake, heartless, disconnected Jewishness has to offer. And Jesus says, you guys have got it all wrong. You got it all wrong. It's not about us. It's about me. I am the Messiah. I'm the king that you've been waiting for. So you can start to see that rub. You see that rub there? Why they'd want to kill Jesus? Especially if you're a self-inflated egotist who loves power, like the high priests and the scribes were. And they have this self-inflated view, and even their system kind of inflates them a little bit. And you can see why they want to hold on to that. You can see why this would cause some friction between them and Jesus. This guy's threatening us. We've got to get away. We've got to get rid of this insurrectionist before he destroys Judaism. The scribes, these are the most well-trained people at the time of the scene here. They're experts on the law. They are the historians. They're the recorders. They're the ones that worked in congruence with the high priest. They didn't have the official sanctioned power of the high priest, but they were the trained, knowledgeable ones. So that with that knowledge was power. All right, they're the learned, the knowledgeable, trained. They're the literate. One theologian says this: they were experts on Jewish life and law. They might be lower level scribes who served the villages as village scribes, making contracts, documents, serving as government officials, but they mostly lived in Jerusalem and associated with the priests. They were expert in judicial procedures. They were helpful in the enforcement of Jewish laws and customs. They even joined the governing class and served on the Sanhedrin, which is their judicial group. Because they depended on the wealthy for their training and their positions, they were loyal to the chief priests and leaders. Essentially, if you were a scribe, your services went to the highest bidder. But you have to understand this. As we march on, I'm going to bring something out. The scribes and the high priest, the most educated people of Jewish law and customs, are the ones who are falsely accusing Jesus. They're the ones who are breaking at least a dozen laws, according to the Jewish Talmud and according to the Jewish laws. The ones who know the most about how things should run break the laws the most, just because they hate Jesus. So this is another group. This is the group of the entertained. They're there. We find them at the cross because they're the ones that accuse Jesus, and they're going to see this out. They're going to make sure they watch Jesus die. They're going to make sure that they see this whole thing fulfilled. This guy that they hated, that they want to see killed, finally they're watching it happening, and they are entertained. This is the group that hates Jesus. This is the group that's motivated by pleasure, by being entertained. They're motivated by probably some of their own self guilt coming out of this. They're motivated by superiority. This is the group that hates Jesus. And they're there. They don't care who this guy is. I just want to see him die because he's a threat to who we are. He's a threat to what we've protected. There's another group here that we see at the foot of the cross. Verse 35, it says, some of the bystanders heard Jesus talking. This is another group. This is the crowds or the bystanders. This is the group that maybe they just lived close. Maybe they didn't have anything to do. I kind of call these guys like the channel changers. They really don't care what's on. They just kind of want something to do. They're flipping channels and like, hey, I think there's going to be an execution down the road. Yeah, let's go. This is the crowds, the bystanders. This is also a group that they're maybe just curious. Maybe they're just kind of interested. Maybe they're just bored. But there's even a side of this who they're really there just to be entertained as well. In verse 36, all right, in verse 36, Jesus is on the cross. It says this: they heard Jesus talking, and someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to Jesus to drink. All right? So Jesus is dying. In this group, someone from the crowd goes and gets this sponge or this gall, this kind of like gross pain reliever, and they run it up to Jesus, and they're saying, Jesus, don't die just yet. We're here for a good show. We haven't been here long enough. He literally says, wait, let's see whether Elijah, who they heard him saying, will come and take him down. So the crowd, the bystander, is there, and they're saying, all right, let's go give him this pain reliever just to keep him alive a little longer. See how twisted this is? So we can be entertained just a little longer. These are the bystanders. This is the group I call the curious or the interested. These are the ones that they weren't paid to be there. They weren't required to be there. They were just there because they had heard about Jesus. They were there motivated by some sort of curiosity, motivated by some sort of boredom. We don't know exactly. These are public executions, and anyone could come, and these were just the people that kind of filled in the gaps from the other faces that we know. And it's a pretty twisted group of people. Then we move on. We see this last group of people. And this is what I would call the beloved, the cherished, the treasured group of faces that were there at the cross. Mark 15, verse 40, after Jesus breathes his last and the centurion says this really is the Son of God, it says, there were also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James, the younger, and Joseph and Salome, another woman. It says when he was in Galilee, when Jesus was ministering in Galilee, they followed him and they ministered to him. And there were also many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. There's a group of women there. There's a group of women that have ministered, have walked along with Jesus, that have been so intensely loved by Jesus. They came from their home of Galilee to Jerusalem following their Savior. These are the ones that, these weren't the ones that were forced to be there or paid to be there or even just curious and bored and they wanted to be there. This is the group that was changed by Jesus. This is the group that was changed. This is the group that's motivated by a real, life-changing relationship. This is the group they're motivated to be there because they have a love for their friend. This is the group that's motivated by loyalty to this Messiah. Mary Magdalene, Mary, and Salome, the mother of Zebedee's sons, most likely. This is the cherished group of people. And we actually know that based on a different account in John, where Jesus looks over to John and says, John, this is your mother now, talking about Jesus' mother. And mother, this is your new son. And Jesus, John, the beloved disciple, most likely, is there as well. This is the group of people that they're there because they cannot believe what's happening. I cannot believe that the man that I've lived with for the last 3 years, the man that I've spent the most time walking together with, is being crucified. I am not leaving this man. I am not leaving. You cannot take me. I will quit my job. I will pause everything just to be with this man. Please don't take him from us. This is the group that's been so changed. This is the group where they've walked and they've talked and their hearts have burned within them because they've been touched by Jesus. This is the group that's been entirely changed. Mary Magdalene is actually, according to Luke 8:2, was Jesus cast out 7 demons from Mary Magdalene. These are the people that have been absolutely, fundamentally changed. Their lives have been rerouted because of Jesus. So these are the groups that we see here, guys. They're all there based on different motives. They're all there for different reasons. There's the required group. There's the scoffing group. There's the entertaining, the religious elite, what's the word? Hypocrite. They're hypocrites. the interested group. There's the cherished group. This is what we see here around the story of the cross. Verse 33, it says, and when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of the bystanders hearing it said, behold, he's calling Elijah. Someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink, saying, wait, let's see whether Elijah will come to take him down. And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. There were also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary and Salome. And when he was in Galilee, they followed him, ministered to him, and they were also among many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. Here we watch Jesus die. But before we wrap this up, I want to ask the question, what's happening underneath this? Okay, we see the groups of people that are there. We see some of the faces, we see some of their motives, but what's actually happening? All right, so I want to look what's happening judicially, I want to look at what's happening socially, what's happening physically, and what's happening spiritually. All right, there's on all these different levels, something is happening. There's a series of events that has led to this main event on all of those different levels. All right, so for one, judicially, we talked about the high priests and the scribes. The thieves there, they were executed legally and lawfully. They did something wrong and they should be killed, according to their laws. Jesus is being murdered illegally. Before Jesus is brought to the place of the skull, he went through 6 different trials. All right, where Jesus is brought in between different men, and while they're doing that, they are breaking all sorts of Jewish laws. All right, so watch this. They weren't allowed, being a Jew, you could never make an arrest at night. It's in the middle of the night. That could never happen. The time and the date of the trial were illegal because it took place at night and on the eve of the Sabbath. They couldn't do this before the Sabbath. This is totally broken. They're arresting him at night. They're trying him at night. They're doing this before the Sabbath. So then the Sanhedrin, the judges, the judicial group, they didn't actually have the authority to give him charges. They didn't have authority to charge this guy. This is only supposed to, they're just supposed to be the ones that investigate. They're not the ones that sentence. They don't actually bring the charges. They allow a proper trial to happen. But the Sanhedrin, the group that's supposed to be the investigators, actually charge Jesus. That's not supposed to happen. So that's a problem in itself. The wrong people are saying the wrong things at the wrong time and the wrong day. And then we see that the charges against Jesus were actually changed multiple times. So at first, they charged him because he was the king of the Jews, so-called. Right? And then they changed it later, and that it was he was claiming to be a replacement for Caesar, and he didn't advocate paying taxes to the Romans. So this whole series of trials is Jesus is just being ripped to pieces by men that hate him. They broke another law. Jesus was allowed to have two witnesses, or he was allowed to have someone defending him. And then they were supposed to have two witnesses that could collaborate stories about Jesus, but since they made up different stories of his accusations, no one actually agreed. And we see that in Mark chapter 4, early in Mark chapter 15. The own witnesses didn't agree in their stories. One of the worst, ways they broke the law was that they actually inflicted harm on Jesus. You could never hit a defendant. You could definitely not hit a defendant before he was sentenced. Before he was found guilty, you could never hit someone. And here we find that cohort, that group of up to hundreds of men, are beating him, spitting on him, they're ripping him to shreds. This is what we would call it's a kangaroo court. They fast-tracked Jesus to the cross. Judicially, they broke every law that they knew of, and this is coming from the high priests and scribes who knew all the laws. So when they broke the laws, they knew exactly what they were doing. That's what's happening judicially. Socially, the cross was the lowest form of execution. It was reserved for the worst criminals. The cross is literally where we get the English word excruciating. Ex-cruce, out of the cross. This is how bad, this is how painful, this is how terrible, this is how much manslaughter is going on here. We get a whole word that describes the worst type of pain. The cross is something where you die from several different ways. You die from suffocation because you couldn't expand your rib cage enough to fill your lungs with air, or you would die from cardiac arrest where your heart it was trying to work so much and it just couldn't operate and move like it should that it just stops. And if you weren't dying fast enough, the Roman soldiers would actually come and break their legs and say, all right, I think we've had enough. Let's speed things up a little bit and let's just let these guys die. This is why Galatians tells us anyone who dies on a cross is cursed. Everyone knew it was the worst way to die. Medically, what's going on here? When Jesus is actually on the cross, and the way Mark writes it's almost just, it blends in with the scenery of the story. And it kind of casually says, and they crucified him. It was the third hour and they crucified him. And the inscription, it just kind of keeps going on. But the body of Jesus is literally being broken. One theologian writes this about the chain of events which actually lead to Jesus dying. It says, with the weight of the body being supported by the sedulum. The sedulum is the part where their legs were placed on the cross, where they did have a little bit of grip and a little bit of a reference point where they could push themselves up and gasp for air. So he says, with the weight of the body being supported by the sedulum, the arms were pulled upward, and this caused the intercostal and the pectoral muscles to be stretched. Furthermore, movement of these muscles was opposed by the weight of the body, right? The bodies they're working against each other. With the muscles of respiration thus stretched, the respiratory bellows became relatively fixed. And as dyspnea developed and pain in the wrists and arms increased, the victim was forced to raise the body off the sedulum, thereby transferring the weight of the body to the feet. So that the respiration became easier, but with the weight of the body being exerted on the feet, pain in the feet and the legs mounted. And when the pain became unbearable, the victim again slumped down on the sedulum with the weight of the body pulling on the wrists and again stretching the intercostal muscles. Thus, the victim alternated between lifting his body off the sedulum in order to breathe and slumping down on the sedulum to relieve pain at his feet. Eventually, he became exhausted or lapsed into unconsciousness so that he could no longer lift his body off of that platform. In this position, with the respiratory muscles essentially paralyzed, the victim suffocated and died. Medically, physically, there's the shallowness of breath. It causes small areas of the lungs to collapse. And the decreased oxygen and increased carbon dioxide actually would cause this acidic condition in the body's tissues. And then fluid would start to build up in the lungs, which would just compound everything that happened before that. And eventually, if you don't get enough air, the heart is stressed and eventually stops beating. Pretty gruesome scene. Pretty terrible way to die. But Spurgeon said this. He asked the question, why so much suffering? Why was this so bad? And why did Jesus allow it to get so bad? And the first time someone offers him relief, in verse 23, he says he doesn't take it. Well, why didn't you take that, Jesus? Why didn't you get any relief you could? This is what Spurgeon says about this. This suffering to the utmost was necessary to the completion of the atonement, which saves to the utmost. Jesus let this happen. Jesus he took the full weight of death on him so his blood could be made for the full spectrum of the world. That's what's going on medically, spiritually. What's going on here? On a spiritual level, if this is the most important time frame of Christian history, what's happening on that level then? I think for one, God is pouring out his judgment of sin on his Son. God is unleashing his wrath on his Son. If you read the Bible at all, you know that sin must be punished. And here's where God deals with sin. It has to be dealt with before the holy judge, the holy God. And here is God doing just that. He is pouring out his judgment on sin, on his own Son, so he doesn't have to pour his own judgment on you. This is exactly what's happening spiritually, where sin is being punished once and for all in the person of Jesus, and God himself is ripping Jesus apart so he doesn't have to rip you apart, ever. And anyone who puts their faith in that Jesus, it's been covered. Their sins are if you believe in Jesus, they're gone, they're removed as far as the east is from the west. You have no condemnation. There is no punishment coming your way if you're in Jesus. God, in this scene, God is dealing with sin once and for all. God is also making a way for sinners like you and me to get to God. Mark 15:38 says the curtain was torn in two. That's a symbol of direct access to God. Whereas before, the priest could only go one time, once a year, on behalf of everybody. That is torn. You don't need a priest to get to God now. The temple is torn. It's symbolic of, I get Jesus. I get God at any time. I don't need a priest to take me to God. I have direct access to God. Guys, that impacts every day of your life. If you pray before your meals, you go before God yourself. You wake up and you say your prayers. You say your prayers before bed. This is the work of Jesus has allowed that. Jesus is making a way for us to get God. What's going on here is God is also making ground. He is making ground for you and I to stand on before himself. If there is no Jesus, if there is no death of Jesus as a substitutionary atonement for you, if there's none of that, there's no way you can stand before God. No way. And what Jesus is doing here is making it possible for us to get God. He's making a way for you and I and anyone who believes to say, I'm forgiven. This allows us as his children to have the ear of God. This allows us as God's children, as those who believe, to have direct access to God whenever, wherever I get him because of Jesus. And I think God is also substituting his own son, Jesus, for you. God is substituting Jesus for me. And there's a whole plethora more of significant ideas that's happening here. I'll discuss a few in just one second. But what about you guys? Are you passing by? Are you going to walk through this life and ignore what Jesus has done for you? Or would we find you in this scene that we're painting? Would we find you at the foot of the cross, my friends? Would we find you clinging desperately to Jesus? Are you being brought to your knees in humble gratitude because you, deserving of hell, have been given Jesus the door to eternal life? That's what's happening here, spiritually, judicially, socially, politically. This is the tip of the iceberg. There are so many cogs to this motion forward, this story here that we barely touched. But the significance of the cross is immense. And this is where we'll end it. The significance of this scene. For one, the cross causes us to remember our need for Jesus. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. My sin has made me guilty and worthy of punishment. I cannot give myself life. I cannot ultimately forgive myself of my sins if I've offended someone else, being God. And Jesus is the only grounds on which you can stand before God and be forgiven. So we need Jesus, and his death is where God dealt with that sin once and for all. Right? So it causes us to remember our need for Jesus. This isn't a one-time thing. It's not just the front door. Jesus is the whole house. He gets you in and he walks you through and he stays with you. The cross causes us to remember the sacrifice, the cost of salvation. How much did it cost for me to go free? How much did it cost for you to walk off scot-free? It cost the death of someone else, and that someone else was Jesus. It cost the perfect one who lived this life of perfection. It cost him to be beat. It cost him to be whipped over and over, torn apart. They take him to the house of Annas. They beat him up. They take him a little farther. They beat him up. They take him a little farther. They whip him. They take him a little farther. They're plucking his beard. They're spitting in his face. He has no skin on his back. This is the cost of salvation. Someone else dying. And you will never experience that type of condemnation because Jesus paid the bill. The cross causes us to remember God's immense love. God shows his love for us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. No greater love is this, but a man laid down his life for a friend. No greater love is that. No greater love. And this is exactly the scene that we see. Jesus laying his life down for a friend. The cross causes us to remember God's immense love. And if you tap into that, guys, you have tapped into life. The cross causes us to forget the past and its sinfulness. If you are in Jesus, if you believe in Jesus, you are a new creature. There is no condemnation for those who are found in Jesus. Jesus didn't get a lawyer when he was on trial, but when you become to Jesus, he becomes your lawyer. And he he pleads your cause to God the Father. And if Satan were ever to walk up onto this scene and accuse Chip, accuse Daniel, accuse Ben of something, Jesus would say, no, that one's mine, bought by my blood. Get away. You've got no case here. You can forget, run from the past. It's nailed to the cross with your flesh. Move forward in love. And that's another thing the cross causes us to do, is it causes us to move forward in love. This being a living visual representation of love in motion. This crucifixion shows us how to love powerfully with all that we've got for the glory of God. The cross causes us to forgive those who have wronged us, and the cross frees us from the power of sin. Thomas Aquinas said this: just as man was overcome and deceived by the devil, so also it should be a man who should overcome the devil. And since man deserved death, so it should be a man who by dying vanquishes death. That is why it is written, thanks be to God who has given us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Guys, my chains are gone. I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, his mercy reigns. Unending love. amazing grace. Father in heaven, thanks so much for your church. Thank you for the crucifixion. Thank you for the cross of Jesus Christ. Thank you for taking my place, God. Thank you for dying. God, we love you so much. Would you never let us stray too far from this scene? Never let us stray too far, Lord, from this picture of you and your incredible love, giving us Jesus and all that he is. So we get you. We don't get hell. We get heaven. We don't get condemnation. We get life as you want. God, we love you so much. We ask you to go before us now and, Lord, change us from the inside out because of your Son in Jesus' name. And that's the only name we will ever pray under. Amen. And all God's people said? Amen. All right, amen, guys. You guys are dismissed. Thank you so much for being with us today.